Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode of Indie Impressions. My name is Nick and today we're going to be checking out a game called End of File. This is a first-person puzzle platformer with a little bit of a like Fez meets perspective meets anti-chamber kind of vibe to it. It's a minimalistic, surreal, and very, very beautiful game, and this one is apparently being called a prototype, but honestly the whole thing feels kind of like a full-featured game, and it was totally free, and it's really, really good. I actually played the whole thing all the way through. It took about 40 minutes. I usually like to leave these types of things for first impressions, but I ended up just being really into it and didn't want to stop, because at that point, after I played enough of it, I realized, well, I just want to see how far this thing goes. And what I played of it, really, really good, clever puzzles involved, and, well, I should just get into the game and show you before I end up gushing for 10 minutes without even showing you any of the game. So, we're presented with this very basic screen here. Oh, I should mention also, minor epilepsy warning. There's not much flashing, strobing stuff going on, but there's like a moment right at the beginning and a moment towards the end that are definitely a bit on the difficult to look at side, but they pass quickly, so if anything, just fast forward like 40 seconds, and you should be good for most of the episode. So we've got vector tessellation, or translation rather, on WASD, that means move. We've got visual tracking on the mouse, because this is a first-person game after all, so we've got mouse look. We've got velocity amplification on shift, and we've got vertical displacement, and that means, jump and run through those things. So we've got this big old room here with a lot of very strange-looking seams all over the floor, and I was looking at this and going, well, I really hope this isn't like the way the whole game looks, because that looks really strange. But when you hit that big old execute button, well, you'll see why that is the way it is. The whole game generally has this sort of white, stark, contrasty kind of thing going on, very anti-chamber vibe, but definitely in a good way, not in like a copying way or anything like that. You'll see, it's got its own identity to it. So let's execute. Bit of chromatic aberration there. I'm glad I learned that word, because I use it all the time now. And we're going to fall into a pit. Things will speed up, and we will find ourselves in the first chamber where puzzles will take place. It's got a little bit of a portal thing going on, too, the way that the areas are kind of subdivided. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily inspired by Portal in really any other way than that. It's just, it's got a clever thing going on with a little bit of a hub area that will pop into at times. I'm sort of likening the hub area to the elevator that seems to crop up. So we'll navigate through this little hallway, and then we start to get a little hit of the soundtrack, which is also quite lovely and atmospheric and goes well with it. It's a little bit maybe unsettling at times. This is a kind of a creepy game, even though it's also kind of just lighthearted in a different way too. It's kind of tough to peg, honestly. There's some happy things going on, some sad things going on, and what we've got going on here is that little arrow that tells us look. So if we just stare at that long enough, it changes to walk, and this, what used to be a three-dimensional box, turns into a platform. So that's kind of the basis of how these puzzles tend to work. They're largely due to perspective. You got to find the right way to orient your viewpoint to create, sort of, I want to say non-Euclidean geometry. I don't think that necessarily makes sense in this context, but I'm creating situations that don't actually make any sense as far as geometry goes. Also kind of fun, and this is completely tangential, but I enjoy things like this. Anyway, the developers saw fit to create little situations like this, where you can kind of hop around the borders of the level bounds, which are just kind of fun for completionists like me, because they even included this little Easter egg here. If you're reading this, then get back to work. The only way to get out of here, actually, though, is to just fall. Not a big deal. There's not much in the way of punishment in this game. If you fall off the edges, you really just respawn right about where you fell. Because that's not the point of the game. It's not a punishy kind of game. It's just a progression-oriented sort of thing. So go through another tunnel. I'm not going to show you too many of the puzzles here. Like I said, the game is like 30 to 40 minutes long, so there's going to be a bunch of puzzles, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to spoil the clever stuff that's going on later on. And I must say the game progresses in a really nice way. As you get further into it, the puzzles really do feel like they scale well, and you feel like you kind of get a hang of what you're supposed to look for and what you're supposed to do. So in this case, we've got these bright blue kind of turquoise platforms against these more grayish slatey turquoise platforms, and we're just going to try and create a bridge out of these in whatever way we can find. So we're going to try and line this up so it makes what appears to be, there we go, a nice little bound around it. And the game is nice enough to actually include sort of an auto-fit feature where if you get close enough, it'll sort of just make sure you're standing in just the right spot. My one criticism about that is that sometimes I've had it not really go into effect, where it sort of seemed like it got stuck for a second, and then I had to like walk around and kind of reorient my view, and then it seems to find the goal point. Should mention, of course, since you can jump, this puzzle isn't necessarily really required to be done to completion. Like, I could just jump up right here and be done with it and move on, or I could take the time to go down here and situate these last 2 blocks, which I think this one needs to go from this angle, like over here. That's what that little shard is on the other side. And then that adds in. Then we've got the last one that shows up. How does this fit? Like this. It's all about perspective. There we go. So now we've created a full bridge. I'm not sure if that would have been a good moment to use for sort of tutorializing that you maybe need to fit every piece together in every scene, because you don't always, but it seems like, you know, it's a little bit up in the air whether or not you're supposed to, whether the game requires that of you. And, you know, that could come back to be a little bit confusing for somebody later, but, you know, honestly, I only got stuck in this once for about 5 minutes. The puzzles are not overly difficult or anything. Most of them seem to be well within grasp, and I think, you know, most people probably won't even get stuck. I was just being a dingus and did something kind of silly by not walking into a wall completely and sort of standing and hovering in what I thought to be the correct place. So you'll see up there we've got a clock mechanism, and that seems to be what is linked to this big old gate that eventually we're going to hopefully find our way to. In the meantime, though, we seem to find what is to be our hub area, and it's got a few tiers on it. Each tier's got a few platforms filled with doors, and all these doors lead to chambers with puzzles in them. So we're going to click this crystal, go on through, and I'll do 1 or 2 more rooms so you can get a good idea of what we're getting into. Like I said, the puzzles do scale a little bit, but they're not going to get so difficult over the course of things that you find yourself frustrated. If anything, they kind of emphasize platforming a little bit more later on than they do at the beginning, although this one puzzle happens to be a bit of the exception to that. Got these bizarre shapes kind of gyrating off in the distance with only like one side of them visible at a time, which is kind of interesting. And the developers seem to really pay close attention to, you know, textures and, you know, the vibe of an area, because there seems to be a lot of little flourishes that weren't necessarily required to be included. They just sort of feel like extra little added ambience. In fact, there's even a scene or an area that is completely not filled with puzzles. It's just sort of there for you to walk through and take in the sights, and I think that's a really nice inclusion. There's not enough of that goes on anymore, I feel. So this is introducing these green chunks that we can click until they slide into place, whichever direction they happen to be oriented. This reminds me a lot of Cube with QUBE, quick understanding of block extrusion, another indie game that I was quite fond of, and one that I actually look forward to going back to one day, because I just found it maybe a little bit difficult at times in frustrating ways. This game doesn't seem to suffer from those issues at all, but it has some of the same concepts with these sliding block puzzles and such. So let's shoot ourselves across here, and now we just got 2 more. I didn't realize at first that with these blocks you can actually click them multiple times. I thought that they just kind of go in or out, and they just sort of toggle. But with these guys over here, you can see they come out or in like several times, and you can use left and right click for that. I guess if you really want to be crazy about it too, you could even like retract them all the way in and try and use the other side. But none of the puzzles get quite that wily that require you to like kind of break the, you know, the way the game works or the way the game teaches you about its perception. It's just generally more about minor platforming and then perspective changing stuff. So this one, let's see, we've got a green block there sticking through the floor. Sometimes it's kind of nice to like get these things pushed through just so you can, you know, not have to worry about them later. That's what I'm going to do in this case. And I think you can only interact with things from a certain distance. So from this far away, I'm not sure I can touch that. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. And let's just go upstairs and see what we've got going on. I really like how everything is so, like, just completely white. It really goes well to, you know, contrast against the sky, and really lets the details all pop out and give you kind of a really nice feeling of the setting that's going on here. It's very stark, but it's very cool to look at too. There's, you know, the little details like this kind of cracked thing that lets the color pop through. It's a nice detail too. All right, let's set up this next puzzle here. So we've got a doorway, which happens to look kind of like it's up in the sky. Like, I'm not going to be able to jump up to that. So let's just kind of kick all of these blocks into place however we can, get them all going, and let's see if we can maybe create a scenario where all of a sudden things make sense. So you'll notice these all just turn turquoise. There's a reason for that. That's telling you that these are now in place, and I already know what to do here, so unfortunately I'm spoiling this puzzle a bit, but this is kind of what we're after here. You want to create a set of stairs that'll allow us to get up to the door, and isn't that lovely? So that's all it really took. In this case, just sort of expanding a few blocks, knocking them into place, and then finding the right perspective to look at them through, and then it creates a new structure entirely. Maybe we'll do just one more here, and then we'll call it a wrap on end of file. I don't want to give away the reason that the game is named the way it is, but I will say that it is aptly named, and really has a really kind of funny, punchy kind of ending to it that might catch you by surprise. Because it definitely caught me by surprise. This totally reminds me of the room from, there was actually a building, like a physical building that I visited, a museum, the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum. I can't remember which state I saw it in, but it had a room just like that, where like you walk over a bridge and every part of the walls and floor and ceiling were all rotating like a cylinder. And it kind of felt like you being on the bridge, your perspective was totally thrown off. And it sort of seemed like you were just spinning in a circle, because you had like nothing to grab onto. It's a very strange feeling, and, you know, very rarely do I see that channeled in a game. So this puzzle is the one that I got stuck on because I was overthinking it. You walk up here, you make a set of steps, you realize everything is turned blue, and you go, well, wait a minute. Door's not open, and I also can't make that jump. And then I started looking into really weird things, like trying to get onto these edges and seeing if I could, like, break the game a little bit. And indeed, you can get up to the door here. I'm not sure if you're designed to be able to, but I did. Found my way around the other side, started looking around, I'm like, well, there's the tube, how do I get into there? Or can I go back and maybe there's like a way underneath? And then I was thinking maybe I needed to like pop the blocks through the floor and try and edit them through the floor. I was, you know, going way too far with this whole thing. None of that is the case. In fact, all you need to do is sit up against this wall and look at this staircase, and all of a sudden, there you go. Problem solved. So there's our way up, there's our path to the next puzzle, and I think I'm actually going to stop the video at this point, just because I really don't want to give away any more puzzles. They're actually really cool, and I think you should go download this for free and try it out yourself. If this indeed turns out to be a prototype, and that was the first tier of the platforms, you'll see there's still 2 more going up ahead. If this looks interesting to you, definitely let me know what you think about it. In the comments, feel free to leave a like on the video, that helps me out a whole bunch too. And I'm really interested to see if this ends up becoming more of a game than it is right now. If this is indeed a prototype, I would love to see this as a full-featured game beyond even what's here, because I feel like it's done right now. And there's so many cool concepts going on here. So if the developers end up turning this into like a multi-hour game, I will 100% endorse this one easy, because I do right now, and I think you should go try it. So with that, I'm going to leave you for another day. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I will see you all tomorrow for another one, and hope you have a fantastic night. Thank you for watching, everybody.